Welcome back, everybody. So we're in the open session of committee at the whole. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thanks, Vice Chair Boland. Just a quick update for those of you who weren't in the room, just to let you know that we are proceeding with interviewing a very strong set of candidates in the next couple of weeks. And we certainly are setting up the process so that we will be still aiming to have somebody on board for the end of February for the board meeting on February the 28th, I believe. So excellent candidates. We were just thrilled with the kinds of skill sets and experience that offered to come and be a trustee. So we're very excited about that. So we'll keep you posted and stay tuned. We'll be announcing something soon. So I think that's pretty much all I needed to say.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the year-to-date financials. I'll hand it over to Jen.
And Tammy is just heading down the hallway. She was going to do the year-to-date financials. Speak slowly.
Slowly, can you speak?
No, I guess I'll just make it a little bit
Here.
Can you hear? So as you know, this is part of our cyclical reporting. When we think in June, it's the estimates. We're thinking of the budget for the next school year. In November, it's the financial statements down here. Financial statements, and that's the result of the previous school year. Revised estimates, we tighten up our budget numbers and submit them to the ministry. This is the year to date, which is more in line with those revised estimates. So we did the budgeting last June. It was our best thinking for the 23-24 school year. Now it's the year to date financial report. So depending on whether it's in part of that 10-month cycle or a 12-month cycle, there's different percentages we look for. And with that, I will hand it over to Tammy.
Sure. So the expenditures have been reported up to the end of December, representing 40% of the school year and 33% of our fiscal year. So in general, they should be between 33 and 40% spent, depending on the pattern of the expense, whether it's teacher salaries or electricity, etc. So at the end of December, the total operating expenses show 34.21% of forecast being spent, up 0.6 compared to December of last year, indicating that we're on forecast. And we'll look at that in more detail when we get to that page of the report, of the backup. So what changed from budget to revised? So in the revenues, our grants, our GSNs, increased for enrollment by 528,817. Our grants for the Q&E grant, which is our qualifications and experience grant for our teachers and our ECEs. So our average salaries, but how we're funded for those average salaries. So that went down 451,785, but our expenses also went down because of that. Other grants that increased in the GSNs amounted to 225,600 approximately. That included an increase to our SIP grant because it was estimated at estimates. So we've got an updated revised estimate amount that was up by that. The summer learning amount was included. It wasn't included in the GSNs at budget time because I think they were still deciding on how that was going to be done. That's one that was funded through code in past years for summer learning, and it got moved into the GSN. So that was about 30,000. And then the transportation grant increased about 41,000 for some retention bonuses for the vans. Is that what it was? Special purpose vehicles. Special purpose vehicles. Okay. And then the next line is the increase in the transfer from deferred revenues, GSNs. So those were grants that weren't spent in last year's year end that needed to be carried forward into this year, with the biggest one of that being in the Indigenous funding grants for, which is more than just 1 year carried forward. It's a couple of years carried forward. Increase in miscellaneous grants, which is what we call PPFs, increased by 1,065,000. That also includes a carry forward amount of about 255,000, mostly being the summer school grants that were allowed to be spent into the fall. So that was carried forward. The other big increases so those are grants that we didn't know about at budget time. The rest of them, so it includes cybersecurity grant that we got for about 258,000. Supporting students with disabilities was 150,000. That was a grant we didn't have at the time. And then food for learning and PPC grants support our student nutrition programs. We have about 196,000 that we didn't know about at estimate of time. So that is included in here. So that makes up the biggest ones. And then an increase in other revenue, tuition, rent, and interest went up by 337,000. So we've increased the interest based on last year's actual interest, and the rates are basically staying the same. So we increased that about 100,000, tuition about almost 200,000, and then rent another about 40. For a total of slightly over $2.8 million. So when we look at our expenditures, the salaries and benefits, not including any changes related to the PPFs, went up by 843,000. When we look at the staff, it looks like more, but again, remember that the average salaries also changed. So that brought that number, makes that number look lower when we look at that. We have an increase of expenditures equal to the deferred revenue GSNs. So we put that into revenue. We've also got that in expense. And same with the next line, the miscellaneous grants, so in and out. We've increased the transportation costs by 419,000. Some of that is the money that we got in the grants, as well as a provision for increases and the full amount of the retention bonuses that was added into the budget. We have some decrease in department budgets, which includes some placeholders that was used for EA salaries when we did the revised budget. And then a decrease in facilities budget, which is mostly utilities. And this results in an increased expenditures exceeding revenues by almost $363,000, giving us a deficit of that amount since we were balanced at budget. And then a reminder that these are based on projected March enrollments, not actual March enrollments yet. So that's still an unknown. So the next page of the report, I got is a summary page. So I won't go through this one in detail. I do want to make a comment that at the bottom, the prior year operating surplus, I didn't update. So the starting point at the forecast column should have been 4,697, and the ending balance should have been 4,334, because we're now taking 363,000 out of that accumulated surplus. So that's, I think, the biggest highlight on this page. That we'll talk about more of the details on the other pages as we go. So the next page is the summary of enrollment. So since enrollment drives our changes in grants is a big part, and it also drives the changes in our expenses. So elementary enrollment went up 47,000 from what we budgeted, and secondary went down slightly by 6. So overall, our enrollment is up 41,000 from what we budgeted. So when you look at the change in enrollment, there's a little graph underneath that chart that shows by family of schools where we saw those changes. Blue being the elementary schools by family, and the green being the secondary schools. So the next page is the staffing page. So
Can you just go back to
Sure.
the enrollment? So it's a big dip in Madawaska. Is there a reason, like, have you narrowed that down why there's like minus 22, I'm assuming elementary, right? And then one in the high
it
school?
is, yes, and that's at Palmer Rapids.
Part is Palmer Rapids, part is the grade 8 cohort at Sherwood was far larger than the incoming kinder class. So the whole school population on the Sherwood side decreased significantly as well.
Thank you.
So on the staffing page, we have our total, our budgeted staff of 1,181 and our actual of almost 1.2. So our teachers went up 4.8 FTE, which down at the bottom, I have a little summary that says 2 of that 4 is for increased enrollment on the elementary. So we went up 41. So 2 makes sense that we went up in teachers. We went up 0.34 for secondary enrollment, even though our enrollment didn't go up in total. When we were doing some staffing in the fall, early fall, it appeared that it was up. We had more grade 9s than we had projected. So we needed some more staffing at that point in time. When we got to at the end of October and I could see some more actual numbers, we determined that it was fairly consistent. So, but we'd already added in the extra that was needed in the schools at that point in time. We still hold back some sections for second semester, so if some of those aren't necessarily needed, then we may not be up by that 0.34. So it depends on how second semester goes. Then we're also up 1.34 for secondary special education teachers. And then, oh, sorry, and then 1.03 for secondary for PPF grants, and that's actually our Shazam grant that we went up there. Other classroom is up 13.8, made up of 1 ECE for enrollment, 10.8 for educational assistance, 1 SSC, and 1 for a PPF grant, which was the supporting students with disabilities grant.
So a question again, like it's a big number for EAs. Does that mean there's just more issues in the classroom?
Yeah.
And is that like,
Yeah. Some we had in placeholder budgets, so we knew just hadn't given out yet. And then some, yeah, we used the increase in the special education grant for the SIP funding, et cetera. But yeah, it was more needs in the system. Okay, so the next page is comparing the grants from budget to revised estimates or forecasts. In this, I won't go through every line. I'll touch on some of the big ones. So the Pupil Foundation grant, the variance note A, yeah, is up 252,000. That's where you see the biggest part of the enrollment change in grants. So all those A's represent some sort of increase in that grant related to enrollment. Special education was enrollment, which is line 3. Enrollment and the SIP grant that went up. So that's a combination of things. Lines 11 and 12 is a combination of enrollment and the change in the qualifications and experience grant. And then transportation at line 17 is also some enrollment, but that extra retention funding that they gave us. Line F is where you see the tuition, and then line E is where you see the increase in the PPFs and the rent and interest increases.
I just have a question with the tuition. So part of that is with foreign students?
Some is foreign students, some is the students from Algonquin and Pecaucinagon. They had increased enrollment as well in our school.
With the federal legislation just limiting foreign students come in, will that affect us?
It depends, I guess. We get those through the MLI or the Yes Canada. So I don't know if that will affect them. That's the biggest part of that. The biggest part of our tuition revenue is though from West, well, Algonquin's or West. Yeah, we have a few from West Quebec as well. Okay, and the last page, I will talk in 2 chunks. The first part being the budget assessment, so the first few columns compares our budget and estimates to our forecasted budget. And I think I'll start at line 17, just because of the way that changed. So that's provision for the labor negotiations. So the way we reported is the ones that haven't settled, we still budget as if they will settle for the 1.25% or the $1 per hour. So because the EAs and the SSC settled and have been paid out, when we look at the next section, that budget got moved out of that column and into the appropriate line up above, so that it reflects where the expense is now. So they're a settled amount. So when we see that B up above, that's why I have an A and a B. So the A's are the reflects an increase in staff that we talked about. So that's in our teacher line and our EA lines and ECE. And our professionals, paraprofessionals, because that's where SSCs will be. And our coordinators and consultants. Oh, no, sorry, that's not a B. Okay. And then. Yeah. These are increased expenditures for increased PPFs or deferred revenues. So, and sometimes some reallocations of budgets between when we learn what the budgets are used for. So our Cs represent that. So the biggest one being in the textbooks and supplies. So our classroom supplies. A lot of our grants hit that line until we figure out where we're going to actually spend them. Another big change would be our staff development, where those change. And then continuing education is where the summer school grants carry forward would have gone. So that line changed as well. Yeah, school operations would be a combination of the change in utilities and any change in any just average salaries. So that's line 15. So that's kind of just where the changes that I talked about kind of just flow through all the different lines here. When we go over to the final section of this report, that's our risk assessment. That's our, I talked about that point that we're on forecast. When we look at the individual lines, we're seeing that sick leave is still showing that we're kind of above last year's at this point in time as a percentage. So that's one area that we'll watch. Most of the other areas are just timing or are fairly close. With continuing education, the reason why that looks kind of off, first of all, it's a smaller dollar amount for that line. And secondly, that's where our September carry forward went for our summer school. Even though it was in September, it was part of that grant. And it wasn't there last September. So the timing of the budget and the expenses just kind of make that one look a little bit odd. So, but overall on that line, we're 1.1% difference compared to last year. And yeah, transportation, we're showing down 1.5%, but it's just a timing of how we pay the consortium, not an indication that we're going to have savings at this point in time. Overall showing that we're up 0.6% compared to last year at this time.
You have line 12, you have forecast pressure.
Yeah.
Is that-
It's slightly above the 1%, which makes it a forecast pressure. Whereas the next section kind of are in the savings area. So overall, that's why we're showing we're kind of on forecast. So yeah.
Any questions? Susan?
Yeah, just I guess I'm wondering, looking at the whole picture here, and I heard you say that sick leave was one area that we're kind of watching. So what are the other areas that we really need to keep close eye on, recognizing, how monies do ebb and flow, and I know timing sometimes is a bit of a challenge. So sometimes it's hard to read these really clearly because of that timing. I guess I'm wondering where you're seeing the pressure points are that we need to be really alert to going forward.
Yeah, sick leave seems to be the only spot that right now. So we're watching that one. Yeah, EAs and the usage there we're watching, but everything's good. Like that's the only concern right now. So yeah.
I have two.
I have
Go ahead.
two, I know.
Right.
Sorry. So the costs for CPP and EI, those continually go up, correct? And we don't get extra funding for those, correct? So we've got to find those dollars internally. So
Yes.
what does that look like? Like,
I think last year when we looked at it, it was in and around the $100,000 mark, but that was at last year's rates and percentages. And so I know that through COSBO, they do bring that forward to the ministry as a concern and a pressure. And I feel like there are other groups that are bringing it forward as well. I think there's some trustee associations that are bringing it forward as well, as because each year it's the dual increase, right? It's the ceiling and the percentage.
So
So
this year we've got the double ceiling.
we have the double ceiling, the introduction of the double ceiling. And so I think last year we were running just over it, costing us unfunded about 100. So that would be continuing to increase. And so certainly that's an area that we have our eye to, but we don't have a lot of solutions until that would come through as a benefit increase on, attached to the sums.
I know there's been a lot of discussion around that, and certainly for the bigger boards, like, it's huge dollars. I mean, it's big enough for us, right? It's significant. It's something to keep on. That's it.
Great, thanks.
Steve Kaiser.
Mike?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the time to actually ask this, but it's a curiosity question too. And that is, I understand that each school has a principal's budget. Okay, both elementary and secondary?
Mhm.
Okay. Because of the cost of everything, particularly in the last 5 years, things have really astronomically gone up. Just, I don't expect numbers off the top of your head, obviously, but generally speaking, have those budgets gone up at all? Just a general purpose principal's budget that I want this as a teacher. I go to my principal and say, can we afford this? Can we afford half of this? Whatever. Have those budgets gone up at all in the last, let's say, decade?
Last time we revisited them, we had a committee struck to look at that, and that was in 2018, 2019, Mike. So it hasn't been reviewed since then.
So the same dollar per pupil amounts and the different calculation that we have in that part hasn't changed. But if the enrollment goes up in a school, their budget goes up.
Right.
But if it goes down, their budget goes down.
But under the assumption, if it stayed the same, let's just,
Yeah.
the world's
Yeah.
budget stays the
Then
same.
then no
Their budget since 2018, 19 roughly hasn't gone up. Okay. I just moving forward, not at this meeting, but I just want to drill down to figure some things out, because I'm hearing that, especially in the last 5-6 years, the way things have gone up, it's like the monies are probably very, very tight and getting tighter. Just a general statement.
Yeah, and
Hearing, or so
we are
I think, I do think that moving forward, even in these tight times, is going to be an issue unless something changes. We're living in really, really tight times, and I see that as a real issue that's not going away, but possibly getting worse. Like, let's just say the budgets stay the same and everything keeps going up, and whatever principals have their needs and want to put their money into and buy. I just see that I've done a bit of research, not a lot, but I think it's a real concern that needs to be coming to the forefront to at least revisit.
the challenge there being that the ministry hasn't increased any of the non-salary budgets in years. So except for, school operations and facilities line, they put 2%, but that's usually for utilities, for the changing rates in utilities, not necessarily for other commodity costs for the increase in inflation. They haven't put anything in the grants for that.
That being said,
Yep.
rightfully so, I just,
Yep.
it's a real issue and a
Yep.
growing issue. Thank you.
Steve?
For whatever reason, I didn't get the package in my email, and so I thought maybe we were getting something handed to us today. I don't know why I didn't react to it, but I'm just curious to know about the Palmer Rapids situation. Again, I didn't see the graph, but it sounds like we have some issues with enrollment at Palmer Rapids. Again, like Mike said earlier, maybe this isn't the right medium to ask the question, but I've not heard of any issues like it's an issue.
I can speak to. Would you like to speak to her?
I know we had some parental concerns about the gender equity issue, but I did not understand that was, is that what's affecting enrollment, or?
Partially.
Partially?
Yeah, I will speak to it. So I was briefed on the matter, and my understanding of the situation is there was a group of parents, or there was a group that expressed concerns and did say that they would remove their children from our CDSB. What we did was we are still upholding human rights in our schools and honoring identities. But what we did was we planned to have children in our schools to ensure that we have staff available. And some families did choose to remove their children. And as a result, it's, we are seeing a decrease in enrollment right now.
Noel kept me informed of the issue last year, but again, probably not the forum, but might not be a bad idea to try to get a meeting with the families, the groups, the parents, because I think there might be some commonality to bring them back. I kind of know, I mean, I always get the parent side of the issue, and I didn't really get a lot of information, but I did get it secondhand from some people that I know in Eganville. And so, I mean, I agree with what our stance is, but I think there might be some room for this parental group, perhaps get back, just throwing that.
Thank you. Thanks for the feedback.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tammy. Jen? Yep. So there's no recommendations from this report.
That was just information.
On the next one, the deficit elimination plan, Jen Burns. You're up again.
Yes. That needs my support, teamwork. So as you may or may not know, the ministry has over the past few years moved towards this in-year deficit approach, which is always allowed that 1%. During COVID, it was up to 2%, back to the 1%. But what they've done is put these timelines that if you're going to have a deficit this year, you've got to provide a plan, and it needs to be approved by the Board of Trustees to eliminate that deficit in 2 years. And if you can only do that if you've not had a deficit last year. And so we weren't anticipating the deficit, but with the late change in the funding formula from transportation, and already having been committed to the services that were provided for our students, that change in funding, all things being equal, as Tammy reported in the year to date, we are on track, on forecast for all of our expenditures. However, those expenditures are on forecast, but we had a reduction in funding. And so that is aligned with the deficit that Tammy referred to, which is that $362,000, which is a result of the change in the funding formula with our expenses at transportation being the same. So the consortium, as you know, has 2 member boards. And so that's our portion coming back to us, because the consortium has to have a zero balance. They can't show a deficit or a surplus. And so that's our share of the member board of getting down to zero, is that 362. When you look at the OREG, one of the things the minister looks at is whether it's, is it structural, recurring time over time, or one time only? And the other thing is the extent to which the in-year deficit was a result of circumstances beyond the board's control, which is, number one, it's not structural. We have a plan in place to remove it. And number 2, we didn't know about the change in funding until May, and we were fully committed to the services for the students and their families the next year. So our plan, as we see it, all things being equal right now, one of the changes in the funding formula was those special purpose vehicles not being funded. Those are our vans. The majority are for our students with special needs, but some of them are for our outlying families that just live in areas where big yellow buses can't get down the road, right? So we do make use a lot of those special purpose vehicles. We are looking at that with a magnifying glass this year, with an eye to reduction and streamlining and getting as many students on big yellow buses that we can. That's always our goal. We also are in consultation with the ministry, who is unable to make any changes to the funding this year, but is in discussion with us and open to ways that they could make some adjustments for next year. And then our second year would be, certainly if you're on the board of directors with the consortium, you'll know that one of the changes in the funding formula was to those walk distances for our JKs, 0.5 to 0.8, and for our older students, it's from 0.4 1.6 to 3.2. And so what we would be doing is looking at the impact of adjusting those walk distances and then ideally seeing that reduction in expenses to align with the reduction in funding formulas. So accepting the deficit because the information came to us late, our plan is moving forward to make those two changes so that if all things stay the same, our deficit would be reduced, would be eliminated in the 2 years. And if things don't stay the same, like perhaps our funding is increased, we would have less of a deficit to eliminate. And so that does require the approval of the Board of Trustees so that we can provide the ministry that you are aware and of.
Okay, so we have some questions, Mr.
I find this all really difficult to follow, so I'm sorry if this is a dumb question, but if I were to just oversimplify it, the government tells us that if we're going to be over budget, if we're going to be in deficit, we have to explain why, but the reason why we're in deficit is because they took away our money.
They made a change to the funding formula and we didn't get the information in enough time that we could respond to it for this fiscal year. So,
I like that's not a
Yes.
criticism on you. I just like
it
it's
is,
mind blowing.
no, yes, had we had the information earlier, we could have worked and made changes, but if we're talking about changing a walk distance, it's not something that we can just adjust the routes. We have to communicate that information to the people who are affected by it and work with the providers because that's changed to contract routes and other things. And that takes a little bit more than 2 months over the summer.
Of course, yeah. And my second and follow-up question is with regard to the changes in transportation, do any of these changes mean that more kids aren't going to have access to transportation, or is everybody still capped?
The change to the walk distance would mean currently our SK and JK students only would walk 0.5, so half a kilometer, and the ministry funding formula says that they'll walk 0.8 of a kilometer. So those youngest students, if you were living in that range, would suddenly not qualify for transportation. And with our older students, that is going from 1.6 to 3.2. So you could see why we would need to do some public consultation and share that information with the public and really have a good idea of who's impacted by that, because then as I'm saying this and I'm watching your eyes, I'm also thinking that if you're on the highway and the kilometer, there's no sidewalks, there's no lighting, people are driving down the road at 80 kilometers an hour, we're not increasing the walk distance, right? So we do have those delineations. So that's where the time is needed to see really what the impact, what does that feel like? Without spending a lot of time diving into it, I feel like if you live in Pembroke, if you live in Renfrew, if you live in Deep River, if you're in a community and you're an older age student, you would be affected. If you're living in a rural or an urban area, you're likely not affected. And so again, when I think of these provincial changes, they're often made with those city centers in mind. And when you get out to our wide open spaces, we just don't always see the impacts it's intended.
I think it's really concerning. I know that, and maybe it's you that I'll pass it along to, but I've been getting emails from parents who are very, very concerned about transportation as it is already, let alone reducing it. So it seems like you guys are doing everything right and everything that you can with these little tools. And I'm sure I already know the answer, but there's nowhere else we can get money because transportation is probably the #1 issue that's affecting places like Deep River, Chalk River, and Rolton.
Yeah, and it does have its own transportation grant, as you know, and it's a funding formula and recreated it with the new benchmarks. They did give us 4 years to implement, and they are at the table in conversations and having a better understanding of what's being felt on the ground. So I am hopeful that we may benefit from, in some changes.
On the note, I know it's not part of this meeting, but you might want to consider how it's going to affect enrollment in secondary school. If you think about Renfrew and Pembroke, a student who lives across the street from Fellows who goes to Bishop Smith now has to walk where he was or she was being picked up by bus. Now they can walk across the street. I mean, it could work both ways. And I would bet bottom dollar the Catholic school board is looking at whether it's an advantage for them or not, and it might be something we want to look at as well, because it's something you could leverage with the ministry, I would think.
No, that's a good point. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, just, I imagine the same thing. I noticed that Mackenzie is down as well, and I know we have a huge problem with kids going to Pembroke schools, and the one thing probably keeping them in Deep River is you can toboggan to school. You know, like, but when you're at a tobogganing range, you know, and people are relying on the buses, that I completely agree with Dave. It's gonna be a real problem.
Any other questions? So for this year, we do have a deficit, right?
Revised estimates, right? So we're, if all things stay the same from now to the end of the school year, we're projecting the deficit to be that 362.
That would have to be taken out of reserves to cover that. All right. So with this presentation, we do have a recommendation. And it is as follows, that the Renfrew County District School Board approve the 2023-2024 deficit elimination plan. We need a mover and a seconder for this, please. Hey, Kaiser, thank you, and a seconder. Thanks, Susan. All in favor? Thank you, that's passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the mental equity project. I'll hand it over to Noel.
Okay, so just to be clear, I'm providing a bit of a report to give context, but this is really an initiative from our student trustees. So as I speak to the report, there's the letter from the student trustees is coming around. It was linked in the report, but just so you have a hard copy, and we'll get to the letter in a couple of minutes. So it's in essence just coming out of the pandemic, where people were becoming more aware of the disproportionate impact of certain barriers on certain communities. The ministry managed to negotiate a partnership with Shoppers Drug Mart to provide menstrual products at no cost to schools. And the ministry provided dispensers across the province. It was 1,200 distributed across the province. Our share ended up being 11 dispensers, but as a district, we purchased 90 additional dispensers, and we installed at the time, 3 years ago, based on a survey, in all of our intermediate, junior intermediate and secondary girls washrooms, as well as all of our gender neutral washrooms. We installed the dispensers and have been providing free menstrual products. The partnership was for 3 years, covering 3 school years, and it's ending at the end of this year, which is why student trustees, as an organization provincially, are very grateful for the initiative, because this is something that they've been working towards and lobbying for a number of years, and are now lobbying the government to secure either additional funding or secure another partnership. It was actually in the news a few hours ago. There's a CBC article featuring that Osta ACO and the student trustees are using their voice to request from the government that something be addressed. Now, if there was no funding and we wanted to continue offering this would be a cost that the board would assume. At this time, I think we need to acknowledge that the amount of products was very generous. And in speaking with facilities, we have approximately 60% of our products still in stock. So I think it's a great initiative that the students are using their voice because this is having an impact on their peers. And having this program allows them to be at school uninterrupted. But we do have a bit of a grace period in the event that there was a bit of a delay in either securing a new partnership. I think we'd be fine going into next year. But the ask from the students is that, and certainly I'll turn it over to Susan in a minute. The ask from the students would be, from our student trustees, would be that there would be support from trustees in supporting their letter to the minister.
And if I can just follow up with that, yes, I did have a good conversation with Ava and with Hannah actually about this as well. And I certainly encouraged her to put together a draft letter that we could review, and then I would be happy to put a motion forward saying that as a Board of Trustees, we would send a letter on behalf of the board and our student trustees, obviously specifically, to support this initiative and to request the ministry to continue with this funding or some kind of an arrangement that would secure these items for the future. So that's kind of where we're at. So I'm happy to put a motion on the floor about that. If I could have a seconder, well, you can look after that. So, Leo.
Is there any more discussion on that? Yes, Dave.
Just maybe in reference to the student senate and or student trustees, I mean, this to me would be a great opportunity. Let's just say nothing works out with sponsorship and they are going to ask the board to fund this, that they do it the correct way. I mean, I've been after the student senate to do this for years and they've never done it. This to me would be a great opportunity for them to find a trustee, bring the motion, like let the board go through the process to add this sort of budget process for what looks like it would be the 25-26 year. So I know that's a little bit ahead, but that to me would be the process. And then the board would make a decision to move it in the budget if that's the way. I mean, that makes sense to me. And this to me would be a great opportunity for them to follow the process.
And in terms of timelines, you are correct, because if no partnership or no funding was secured going into next year, we have enough products to last the whole year. So that next year would be the time where they would be asking for a motion for the following year. So
Perfect. I think that would be great to see that come to the board, to the student trustees.
You have just a dollar amount on what it costs like per year, what it would cost us?
we didn't get a breakdown because we would need to look at how much we're using every year and cost the products based on most current prices. But certainly if no funding is secured during the course of the next school year, working towards the following year's budget process, there'd be time to come up with those estimates for sure.
Kristen Rydell, I saw a hand come up from you. Is that true?
Well, yes, I was just going to say, was invited to a student trustee meeting in Ottawa, as was, well, I sent it to Meredith, and if Meredith or Hannah are available on Saturday, February 10th at the Westin Hotel, but the board there wants, the student trustees want to connect with more student trustee groups for similar advocacy for a number of things. So it's an opportunity. I was going to connect with Ava and Grace to see if they've received any information, but it's kind of an invite to join and have conversations about what they want to propose going forward.
Thank you. Any other discussion? So all in favor of supporting the motion? Thank you. That's passed. Thank you, Ronald and Susan. I don't have anything else on the agenda for the committee to whole. So I require a mover and a seconder to adjourn the committee at the whole. Thanks, Dave and Kim. All in favor? That's passed. And 3 minutes over.
3 minutes over. Yes, I'd be getting better, Leo. So how about if we come back for 3:10 to get underway with the board meeting? That gives you a bit of a break, if that's okay. So 3:10.
Something.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our board meeting for Tuesday, January the 30th. Hard to believe that it's that late on. Special welcome to our guest today. We'll introduce you all a little bit later, I know, and we're looking forward to that presentation. And I specifically want to acknowledge this is the first board meeting for Krista Eby as well. So we're thrilled, of course, to have our new director with us here today. I would ask that Trustee Primo could do the territorial acknowledgement for us, if you would, please, Jody.
We acknowledge that the land on which our school and district buildings are situated is the traditional, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people on the land on which we gather here today.
Thank you very much. And if I could call on Trustee Boland, please, to give the invocation.
May we who are assembled here have a true understanding of the duties that are placed in our hands. We seek to have the wisdom to honor our obligations to the good of the residents of Renfrew County, to the parents, teachers, electors, and especially the students. May those who teach be ever inspired by goodness, and may the wisdom and knowledge which they impart to our students ever serve as a beacon to lighten their way. As trustees and administrators, we will work together with integrity, perseverance, and respect to the fulfillment of the trust bestowed upon us.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to take time to do the attendance, please. Vice Chair Boland,
Here.
Trustee Dobson,
Here.
Trustee Doherty, here, Trustee Gannett,
Here.
Trustee Kaiser,
Here.
Trustee Primo, here. Regrets from Trustee Ruddy, and also from Star Student Trustees, Ava Biggs and Grace Ding, as you can imagine, might be doing exams this week. Senior staff, Director Nemi, present. Superintendent Poirier, here. Superintendent Barnes, here. Superintendent Kuzno,
Here.
Superintendent Smith, here. And Superintendent Riddell,
Here.
and Executive Officer Kathleen Jemison, here. Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. I do need a motion to approve the agenda we have before us today. I need a mover and a seconder. Trustee Kaiser, thank you. Trustee Doherty, seconded. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of this agenda today? Thank you very much. And do I have any conflicts of interest being declared around the table on this agenda today? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have the minutes of the special board meeting on December the 8th, 2023. And I need a mover and a seconder to approve and confirm those minutes as well. Trustee Doherty and Trustee Boland, sorry. Thank you very much. All in favor of confirming the minutes of December the 8th. Thank you. All right, on to our presentation. As always, it's the very best part of our board meeting. No question about that. And I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Smith to introduce what we're going to hear.
Sure. This is a follow-up to our previous presentation on the elementary school effectiveness and student success report, our annual action plan. And so we've been speaking a lot about the science of reading and the right to read and changes to early literacy instruction. So today's intention is to bring you a little glimpse into what that looks like in the classroom, which is the most exciting part. And you can see that they're even going to put us to work a little bit and have a little bit of fun. So we hope that you appreciate this privilege to be able to see inside a classroom and hear from one of our well-regarded teachers. And I'll turn things over to Shelley, who will introduce the whole team.
Also bring our train on.
So thanks for having us again. And today, like Jenny said, we're going to take a deeper dive into our focus on early literacy. So as in a previous presentation that we'd shared, our literacy goal is to provide a focus on core skills by implementing systematic and explicit instruction of targeted foundational reading skills using a tiered approach to reading instruction. So this goal was developed in alignment with the ministry directive. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Hannah, PPM 168 specifically refers to the new requirements around early reading screening and early reading instruction. So today we will speak to those two bullets and share a little bit more insight of what happens at the school level and at the system level.
Okay, so next slide, thanks. So I'm going to take you through our learning, so as coaches and lists. And so at the beginning of our journey, we started with the Reading League, and that's where we did the virtual conference to start learning about structured literacy and our science of reading. Following that, we were trained in the Lexia Core 5 reading program and the Power Up. That's a 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 reading program. So it's an online program to help support within the classroom. And that focuses around structured literacy and the 5 pillars within that. We trained teachers, and then we were to show them how they could use the data to help direct their instruction. The coaches also then partook in the Novak Educational Consulting, and that's our universal design for learning course, which has given us a better understanding on tiered instruction within the classroom, building relationships, as well as equity in the classroom. We've all had the opportunity to further our learning through conferences like the Reading for the Love of It, the IDA conference, the ACP conference, and the OMLTA conference. Then we were able to all be trained on the Acadience Reading K-6 Essential Workshop. This training taught us the foundations, the guidelines, the administration, and the scoring of the screener. We followed this with taking the data interpretation workshop, which allows us to use the Acadience Reading K-6 to inform our instruction as well as improve our reading outcomes.
Okay, so as a list, I'm going to take you through some of the data that we collected from October of 22 and June of 23. This is a little snapshot, specifically Herman Street Public School. So in September of 2023, we compiled the data, which looked similar to this, to analyze next steps for supporting our students with regards to our intervention process. So here's a snapshot of some data. So our numbers in blue here are the kiddos. So this strip here is October and the bottom one is June. So these are our kiddos here in the green, which just meant that they scored at or above the benchmark level there. Yellow is just below and red is well below. So you can see the numbers there. In our pink, we've got the total number of students that were screened, combining those numbers. And then what we did was we just had these represented by a percent in comparison to the total population. So following the collection of this data and analyzing it, the list discussed which schools would receive intervention support for the 23-24 school year from the Acadience data. The decision was based upon total SK to grade 2 population. So we did take a peek at the total number, and then we also took a peek at the students that scored in that well below category there, as well as that percentage in relation to their total. When it allowed, based on either data or geographical location, lists tried to split their day between 2 schools in one 6-week intervention round to try and meet the needs of as many students as we possibly could. Okay. So through the work and the learning that the literacy coaches have been doing, we've been working directly with schools and classroom educators to apply some of that learning in order to support students and build capacity in our educators. So right now, from kindergarten to grade 3, our educators have been provided with training developed around evidence-based instruction and the lesson structure of the Youth Life Foundation's manual that was provided to help them with that Strand B instruction that's new to our curriculum document this year. Every K-2 classroom was supplemented with additional decodable text by Flyleaf that aligns nicely with the UFly lesson scope and sequence that they're implementing and using. As part of a literacy kit that was provided to schools a little bit ago, they were also provided with Haggerty phonological awareness, which we've talked about before, as a way to kind of move into that structured literacy approach within our schools. And so every school has access to at least one copy, but most of them have multiple of the pre-kindergarten document, the kindergarten document, the primary document, as well as Bridging the Gap, which is an intervention document, all around that phonological awareness and being able to hear and blend, segment, and manipulate the sounds in our language, in English. Schools were also provided with High Noon and Magic Belt series, which are high interest, sort of lower basic phonics level books, so that our older students who are still learning that basic phonics, the more foundational skills, have access to books that are of interest to them, that also appear more like a chapter book, and it helps build their confidence and while also practicing the skills. Lexia Core 5, like Natalie mentioned, is also available to students in grades 2 to 8 across the county in order to help develop those foundational skills. And that program is able to be responsive to the input that the students put in, the way that they answer questions, so that it tailors instruction, and it also alerts the classroom educator to areas of need and provides support to the educator as far as lessons and other activities to help support that growth. We also have resources available in French to complement the work that's being done in English in our classrooms, so that in a French immersion situation, both educators have access to resources that align with structured literacy to help build those skills in both of those languages, including a phonological awareness resource, as well as decodable books in French. And as literacy coaches, we also continue to support schools and classrooms based on the needs that the educators identify.
Before we get into the fun stuff, and I introduce Brenda. So this second bullet, this ministry directive of the focus, the protected time, it's protected a 30-minute chunk of time in every grade 1 to 3 literacy program that focuses in on that systematic and explicit instruction. So you can hear from what we've shared in the past and what we've shared today that we've really put a lot of time and energy in selecting resources and training that really support that chunk of time to provide that direct instruction. So now I get the pleasure of introducing Brenda Lego. She is a grade 1-2 teacher at Herman Street, and we've known each other probably, date us. Yeah, don't say it. 10 years, but she has continued to adapt her practice. She implements the instruction that is best for kids and really meets their needs. So it's a pleasure to have her here today to walk you through a UFly lesson.
Am I clicking on the blending board? You're clicking on board meeting, January 3rd. This one? Yeah. So I know that you know what UFly is about. So can we move through if you want to keep going? This is the scope and sequence that we follow. And although I have a grade 1-2, I didn't start. Can you move to the next one? Sorry. What is here in yellow is grade 2, green is grade 1, and blue is what's outlined for kindergarten. I started around 24 this year, just to make sure that those kids were on board, because not everybody last year was doing UFly. So I wanted to make sure that they got most of the basics before we moved on to other letter formations, if you want to say. The digraphs, and we can keep going. We'll go right to this is the wall that I had, the sound wall that I have in my classroom. So as we go through each letter, as of now, when I started in September, everything was covered. So as we go through each letter, I will uncover one letter at a time, and we'll talk about it, draw their attention to it as they're writing throughout the year. And you can keep going. Only because a full lesson is broken up into 2 parts, and it takes a half hour per lesson. So rather than keep you here for a full hour, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do this in about 10 minutes, but I wasn't sure what I needed to, I knew what I needed to prepare, but I didn't know what everyone knew. So we can keep going. So there's lesson 20. And it's the letter S. This is day 1. So I'm going to start off by asking you to blend these letter sounds together. So if I say n, e, t, s, what is the word? S, I, s, S. And that's how we do the blending portion of it. Then we can continue on to the segmenting part, where you're breaking the word apart into its sounds. So the first word is pats. Can you break that apart for me? Next one is taps. Taps. Then we do a visual drill where letters are brought up on the screen and they have to tell me what the sounds of those letters are. So the first letter is this one. And what does it say? It doesn't say E because we're looking at the short vowels. We haven't gotten to the long vowel sounds yet. So this is the short E. And this letter is the next one. And the next one. And that's it. Now there's many more, but I've taken a lot of the slides, so it could be short. Then we have the auditory drill, and that is where you're going to need your sky grass ground sheets. And the reason I'm using this is to make sure that children are forming their letters correctly.
Just so you know.
So I want you to print the letter that makes this sound. What letter says eh? Now, it isn't a tall letter. It isn't a letter that goes down into the ground. It's right there in the grass. The next one, and as the children are doing it, I'm circulating to make sure that they form the letter correctly. The next one is B. And ah. Ah.
Oh, I got it.
Ah.
I heard ah.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get the gist of it. And then we go into the blending board that looks like this.
They don't save, right, Brenda? That's
What's that?
their letters didn't save because every
didn't
time
save,
it
that's all right.
refreshes, yeah.
So it's okay. What happens is it's B, C, D, F, G, M, A, E, I, O, U.
We would have this set up prior to the students, but it doesn't save, unfortunately. So every day you have to kind of make sure.
It just sort of helps the overwhelm of the screen, right? As you're scaffolding all of these new sounds and letters, we sort of really just hone in on the ones in that specific lesson. So that's why she's making her board, yeah.
Yes, I only choose the letters that are needed for this specific lesson. So then it makes it easier for me to find them. Otherwise, I would be all day trying to locate all the letters to those words. So the first word is fib. So I would click F-I-B. And I always do a count of 5 because I want the children to be able to read it themselves. Otherwise, if I put the letters up there and the first person yells out fib, then the others aren't thinking at all. So I give them a few seconds to think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they'll call out fib. And then I'll change it. I'll change the B to an N. And if I close my hand, they will say what the word is. And I'm going to change the I to a U. And it's now, and it continues on for anywhere from 10 to 12 words. So that's the blending board. And then the new concept. So I read it verbatim, what is here. That's what we've been told to do, so that's what I do. This is the letter S. We know that S spells like at the beginning of the word sun. We can add S to the end of words too. We know the word cat. Cat has 3 letters, C-A-T, and 3 sounds. If I add S, I now have 4 letters, C-A-T-S, and 4 sounds. This word is tap. If I add S, the word becomes taps. Today we're going to practice reading and spelling words with S at the end. So now you have to learn how to say S properly. And if this were in kindergarten, you would stress it more. But remember, to make the S sound, put your tongue right behind your top front teeth and blow air out like this. The sound is a continuous sound that can be stretched out. It isn't like duh. You don't stretch D out. Duh. S, you can stretch it out. Be sure to keep your voice off when you make the sound. So when your voice is off, you're hearing this. If your voice is on, you're hearing S. And then I would have you try saying S, and I would walk around to make sure you're saying it properly and that your mouth is formed properly. Because what I've noticed lately is a lot of, if you're teaching F or V or TH, a lot of the children are getting those, are making a mistake with those. Doing TH, a lot of them want to say, so Faye went to the store instead of they. So I'm telling them to watch me as I say the word. They, my tongue is sticking out. Whereas if I say Faye, my tongue isn't out. So they're making that connection slowly but surely. And then I would have you practice printing the letter S. I would show you how it's printed, and I would have you practice printing it on your card. And then we are going to do some spelling. I'm going to ask you to spell maps on your card.
On this, please.
Not on this one yet.
No, I'm just on.
So this is the end of the first lesson. And I walk around to make sure that the letter P, that it goes all the way down to the ground.
I think I know how to do it.
I don't think enough evidence.
To make sure that.
And you look at the letter M, a lot of young children make the letter M, like the McDonald's arches. So I walk around to make sure that they have that stick in front and that they're starting from the top and going down, because a lot of children like to make their letters from the bottom up. So I walk around to make sure that they're printing properly. And then we have, so that's the end of lesson 1. Now we have the beginning of lesson 2, or part 2. And this is where you need your board with your letters that you can move around. So the first word I want you to make, and you're going to build your words up here where it says my word. The first word I want you to put together is mat. So you would find those letters in mat and put them up top. Now I want you to add an S at the end. And what is the new word?
Oh, Matt.
Mat. I want you to change the to I want you to change that to
Oh, good.
It's so sorry. And the new word is? And I now want you to change the a to an ah. Change the a to an ah. And what is our new word? Mops. So we would go through many words, changing only one letter at a time, which changes the word. So that's the blending board. And then we go to irregular words.
Keep going. Yeah, just keep going. Nope.
No, we'll go back.
You'll
We'll go
know,
back.
you'll say it. Keep going. Keep going.
So at the beginning of lesson 2, I do a short review of what we learned in lesson 1. So here are the irregular words. This is the word that comes up in every lesson. It's the word said. And it's considered a heart word because the AI doesn't say what we expect it to say, what we've been taught it says. Instead, it says eh. So it's considered a heart word. And it's a word that they just have to remember. The next one. This is another one, but it's not a permanent heart word. So right now they know, the children know A as saying ah, but once they're taught the long A sound, it'll become a regular word. But right now it has a heart underneath it because they haven't been taught the long A sound. Is a heart word as well. The I says what we expect it to say, what they've been taught. The S, though, in this case, is pronounced like Z. So it's a heart word until they learn that S can say. Same with as, and then we're at said again. And then we're going to do some spelling, and this is where I'm going to give you a sentence to write. So in this part, I'm looking for capital letters and punctuation marks of some sort. I'm happy with the period in grade 1 and 2 at this point. So your first sentence has 3 words. So what a lot of the children do, they'll make 3 little boxes. And as they print each word, they'll check off the box. So your first sentence is the cats fit. Now what I have the children do is repeat that sentence. So they'll say, the cats fit. The caps fit. And they'll repeat it again. The caps fit. The caps fit. The caps fit.
The caps fit.
And hopefully by the time they've said it 4 times, it's in their memory. So the caps fit. That's your first sentence to print.
Mine's not down, but it's not supposed to.
And there's 3 sentences that you can give usually. I'm lucky if I get through 2. I usually get through 2 sentences because they're little. It takes, and there's a lot of thinking that goes into them writing a sentence. And then we have, at the very end, we have a decodable. And we go through this twice because we do 2 lessons each week. So everyone reads the decodable together. I'll go along with my pointer. And if there's been a lot of mistakes made, I will have them go through and repeat that sentence again. And I'll draw their attention. Right now we're looking at words with S at the end. I'll draw their attention to those words that have an S at the end. So I'll give them a few seconds to look at it, especially if there's names involved, because they tend to have a hard time deciphering names. So this here is called, and everyone read.
Cats. And got cats. The cats can fit on the bed. Said Tim.
And then we'll go through until the end of that decodable. These decodables go home with the children, and they're expected to practice them at home with hopefully building vocabulary, building fluency and comprehension. I'll often ask them who the characters are in the story, if there's a problem, where they think the story might have taken place. And we can keep going. So we did it. This here is, so at the end of the week, on Fridays, I take the regular words and the sentences and I dictate. That's how I find out whether or not they've gotten the concept. So lesson 20, I would give out those 3 words, sits, pots, and cups, and the sentence, the cats sit up. We do them, then we correct them right away, so it's fresh in their memory. We can continue. So here is what goes home. This is a picture of what the decodable looks like going home. There's a spot at the top where children can draw a picture of what their understanding is of the story. There's this game, roll and read. So you take a die and you roll it. If you get number 4, you choose a word underneath the 4 and you say the word. And the whole idea is to get 4 in a row, 5 in a row. And on the Friday, this is what my sheet looks like. So there's 6 focus words. There's heart words, the words that they have to memorize, or once they are taught that concept, they should know how to decode it. And then there's the 2 sentences. And that's you fly. That's a lesson in about, hopefully.
Thanks for participating and
Yes, thank
for
you.
leading that.
So I'll be speaking to the list roll and how we are offering small group interventions to students in schools. So that would have been the classroom level. And then what we're doing is small group. So we, as lists, once we have the screening data, we connect with CERTs and we go into schools and we discuss the data and try to determine which students would be good fits for interventions. And we're also consulting with teachers at the same time so that as a team, we're making these joint decisions about who would benefit, who requires that extra support. And of course, consulting always with the data, that's sort of what's guiding us in those decisions as well in classroom observation. Once we have that, once we've decided that these are probably the students that we'll be seeing, we conduct further diagnostics. So those are assessments just to determine where the specific needs are. And then that helps us group our students together. So then we have the groups now, and then we reach out to families through a letter, and it outlines what our role is and how long, what the duration is of the interventions and how many students are in these groups. And then I know Brenda was saying she also, as a classroom teacher, would reach out to parents to just sort of give them a heads up that this is what's taking place, and they would have had those dialogues beforehand so that it's not a big surprise to families that their students, that their child is being selected. So once we do that, we meet with our students, and we have groups of up to 1 to 3 students, depending on the needs. Sometimes it's 3 or 2, and sometimes it's one-on-one. The interventions typically are 20 to 30 minutes long in length, and they last for 5 to 6 weeks. So during that time, we're using the U-Fly instruction to guide our instruction as well, but we would be differentiating more based on where those needs were for the specific students in our group. So for example, we run, maybe 8 to 10 lessons a day, depending on the students that we have. And I had there might be 2 groups that were doing lesson 26, and then there might be 1 group that's doing lesson 7 and another group doing. So it was differentiated based on what they required. And if we knew certain students needed maybe more opportunities to practice phonemic awareness, like that sounding out, we might add that in. So we're tweaking those lessons to make sure that it's benefiting the students that we're working with and trying to close those learning gaps. That's our goal. So during that time, while we're in the schools, we're constantly also communicating with CERTs and the classroom teachers to sort of relay information. And we make ourselves available to families or parents if they happen to reach out. And I have responded to some parents who have asked for more information. We also provide that because in our letter, we have contact information so they can reach out to us. And sometimes too, it goes through classroom teachers because we're trying to create that team approach, of course. And so sometimes classroom teachers might be conveying some messaging that that's what's asked to, you know, if they're asking questions of families, and that's our role at that stage.
Okay, so I get to wrap it up. I'm not as exciting as Brenda, but we're trying to share a video with you. There we go. We're continuing to learn and grow into our role as coaches and as lists and how we can best support throughout the system. And here's a couple things that we're doing. So we've got a few things, and we talked about a few of them last time we were here. We're deepening our understanding of the Acadience reading program. We, as Natalie mentioned, did the initial part and the data management part. We are now moving into mentor training so that we are able to train teachers throughout the county so that they can do the screening with their students. We're working with the CERTs as well as so they can best support, and we're talking to them all about how they can use that information to inform their instruction and their work with students in their classes. We're offering ongoing book clubs. So Next Steps in Literacy Instruction is our book club in February, which links right back to that Acadience data and talks about what we can do with it. So if we see this on the screener, here's our next steps with our students. And that's an after-school book club that teachers have volunteered to take part in. We are going to move into a final book club for the year on vocabulary after the March break. So that's pretty exciting, bringing words to life, as well as a few other pieces to teach explicit vocabulary instruction. And before the holidays, we finished a book club on the 7 Mighty Moves, and Brenda was one of the people that got to take part on that. As coaches, we know that we have to keep current with everything that's going on. So we are taking part in the IDA Ontario Basics of Decoding and Spelling Instruction course, as well as a course on syntax, bringing knowledge to practice so that we can continue our learning and bring that throughout the board for best practices in literacy. We're continuing to train teachers on UFly as well as structured literacy. As new teachers move into kindergarten through grade 3, we're working to train them, and we are very excited. The coaches are taking part in a provincial FSL project that is bringing together structured literacy and the CFR, the Common European Framework, to create resources for first-year French immersion students, which is a brand new thing that hasn't been done at all before. So we're pretty excited to keep doing that. Kendra.
I'll pop over here and point to some things. So I'm just talking about how we wrap up our 6 weeks intervention cycle that Natasha was talking about. So a few things we do when we come to the end. So this is a picture, a little screenshot of what our data collection looks like pre and post intervention time. So using our diagnostic. And then we have a hard copy of that as well, which we share with classroom teachers. And these digital this digital documentation also goes out to the CERT team, the classroom teachers, and administration as well. And the hopes that we have that growth documented, and also next steps are really clear as well. And then we also fill out an intervention tracking form, and this stays with the intervention school as well. Again, it's a little more anecdotal, but it documents what our goals were, what lessons we covered, our reflections, and again, some potential next steps to keep going. And finally, this is a screenshot of a decodable. So we would send home the materials that we worked on with students during the intervention times and some further instructions with how to use them at home in the hopes that home support would continue. And also then once that is all wrapped up, we have some more conversations with CERT, with our classroom teachers, with administration, and the intervention cycle would start all over again from the beginning, looking back at that original screening Acadience data.
Just to wrap it up, we have a really cute video from Brenda's class to share with you.
One here.
I think that's the one you got access to, yeah? Oh, no, was it the other one?
Requests should come in again, whoever owns it.
It's the other one you should have access to.
Okay.
I gave you access to one.
No. Just requested both though. We'll get.
It's okay.
Any questions while we're waiting?
Slideshow, so maybe we can take a look. That I hope that that today's presentation gave you a little bit of an insight into the work that's happening in the system, and then all of the planning and looking at the ministry directives, how that translated into classroom practice. And I think Brenda, you did an excellent job of modeling that with our students here today. And there's a lot of ongoing learning for our system team to make sure that the classroom teachers are equipped with the tools and resources that they need to deliver that explicit instruction. So thank you for our team for presenting, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks so much, Shelley. Maybe just while I don't know if we're gonna be able to get the video or not, but would you mind just refreshing my memory on names here and what's,
Sorry, yes, I get right in without trying it.
I know I've
apologize,
seen,
Sorry.
but I don't necessarily know. Anyway. if you
So,
don't
so
mind.
Brenda Lego is the classroom teacher from Herman Street.
Excellent.
And then we have our literacy coaches. We have Natalie Lubitz, Lori Mason, Jordan Sloan, and then our literacy intervention support teachers. I feel like I'm being tested now. Natasha O'Brien, Kendra Frolander, and Courtney Werger.
Excellent. That's
Sorry about that.
Great.
I'm too excited.
I
And
wasn't sure what list was, so I'm glad
Yes,
you.
literacy intervention.
That's sometimes I forget. Any questions or comments from the trustees? Trustee Gannett?
I would think this would all be a useful starting point for teacher night too. You know, when connections made between the parents and the teacher, I would think there would be, you know, a good opportunity for discussion on that topic, particularly with those students that are struggling. Trying to be optimistic yet realistic and just, you know, figure out what you've got to work with at home. And
Yeah.
I just think I think during the teacher night would be just an excellent starting point. I'm sure that's happening. So that's all. Thank you.
The good thing about this resource is so comprehensive. Like there's so much packed into a lesson, as you can see what we went through today. And on their website, they also have a parent section as well that parents can access and complete activities and the little decodable texts and things that they can continue to practice at home just to reinforce those skills that are taught at school.
And before anything goes home, a letter is sent home to the parents explaining what the program is about and explaining the activities that they can do with their child. And somewhere along the road or along the way, I saw somewhere where it said they should be reading those decodables at least 4 times. So I've been relaying that message to my parents on a few occasions because you can tell who's doing it and who isn't.
Any other questions or comments, Dave?
Maybe just on that note, do you find that there is participation from parents to help their kids, like you're doing it 4 times? Like, are you finding that's a positive thing, or is finding that
Well, it gives them something to do.
in the
Like,
results, like, do you find that most parents are helping, or do you find
not as many as I would like to
not
see.
as many as you would like? Okay, fair enough.
Jody?
Just following up on Dave's question, to what extent, like, does equity play an issue in the advancement with this program? So
I don't believe so.
No.
We
so
have
people
been,
from like all different economic backgrounds are advancing regardless of their economic background?
Yeah, so structured literacy versus our balanced literacy. Structured literacy is based in the research and it's bringing together cognitive research, speech language pathology research. Yeah, so so in our previous practices, some students based on their various backgrounds are at a disadvantage. However, structured literacy, because it has been thoroughly researched, it has been proven to be effective for a much wider range of students versus sort of our past practice. And so we've been working, I know it's come up a lot. Today we had a literacy partners meeting with educators from half of our schools. Tomorrow we're doing the other half. But partner reading is a strategy that has been proven through research to be really effective in allowing additional practice to students so that they get that repeated exposure, repeated work, excuse me, I'm talking a lot today. So we've been working a lot with classroom educators about how they can implement that in their classroom and sort of explaining the research behind it and how we know it can have a positive impact so that they can get the exposures that they need in class with an educator there to support that learning.
and the resources go home with every child.
Mm-hmm.
They're available for those who want to use it.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was going, was not for someone who's working a few jobs might not be able to sit down and do like decoding words at home, you know, and so I was wondering if those children were disadvantaged, but I think you guys have answered.
What's really nice about it as well is that if you're on lesson 20, well, lesson 20 will touch on some letters from the previous lessons. So it's that repetition that I think really makes a difference for the children. They're seeing it more than they would have had I been teaching it the way I taught it in the past years. It's that repetition that they're seeing, and I think that's making a real difference with them.
in terms of picking the concepts up. Yeah, constant review is built into the lessons. That's part of when we were looking at resources that were available to help support structured literacy implementation in the classroom. UFly was one they make it very clear what research they've used as part of their development of it. And it's the UFly is from the University of Florida Literacy Institute. So it's come from a university, and it's been worked on through their PhD program and reviewed locally in that state. But it's designed to make sure that all skills are constantly being reviewed so that nothing is dropped. Like Brenda said, I was a kindergarten teacher before this position, and in my past classroom practice, it was, we focused on something for a week. S, and I was a French teacher, so vocabulary words, everything was hovering around that letter S and the sound S. And then, one letter a week, it wasn't until after March break that we'd kind of gotten through the alphabet, and we didn't have time to loop back through. And something that we talked about in October, kids likely forgot unless they were using it as part of their centers and the kinds of communication that they were choosing to do. So this and those structured lessons that are supporting student development, but also educator knowledge, because this is new for all of us. We don't know that the articulation component, like we're not speech language pathologists, so that's supporting the educators and being able to communicate that to students. But anyways, it's designed to kind of make sure that nothing gets dropped and things are constantly being reviewed so that students have so many opportunities to practice and apply that our students who are maybe struggling that need and a large number of repetitions have access to that through their classroom instruction.
Great. Leo, I think you had a question?
Yeah, just a statement as well. So just with the Herman Street stats. So obviously your program is, supporting the students because they're, there's less in the red, more in the yellow, and then I'm assuming the 3 that were in the green, like were some of the students that you didn't assess the second time? Because you said like for the first in September it was 178 students, and in June it was 167.
Yeah, that was just the fluctuation in the population. Like
Yeah.
those that had left the building over the course of the year. That's the only reason.
But I mean, you can tell, like, there are gains there. And the beauty of what had happened at Herman Street was that many of them had taken it on themselves, because we were doing all of this learning at the beginning of next year, but over the summer they had sort of adopted this program into their practice and had done it most of the year. And so that data just represents what can happen when it's focused on all year. So
It'll be interesting to see the results
this year. And then it will be, what we're hoping is that it's more widespread, because all of that training had happened last year. So now we should see this reflection in many more buildings. So, yeah.
The question was, so you had talked about, like, you can tell when the students come back, from like the next day, where they haven't had practice at home, so how can we get, just more participation with parents? Have you thought of, of that, like maybe not that night, but, overall, to really, because it makes a difference, I think, the more engaged the parents are, then the better success that the students will have. So if you looked at like how to engage parents more to better advantage the students.
That, and like I said at the previous thing, that's something that we're really trying to focus in on, and conversations like we'll pick, and are there parent nights that we can offer, or something that we can do through an evening with families to share, or sending it home to schools, like a video or an information sheet, but really trying to engage parents. I know at some schools they host family nights. And so if we can really start to spread that and bring families in to model it for them and give them opportunities to practice in the schools, like that is our ultimate goal. But it's something that we need to continue to work on.
Through report cards, I'm encouraging them to read every night, and I'll make that comment in my report card. I'll also send home curriculum expectations and an example of where maybe their child should be at the end of grade 1 or grade 2. And that sometimes is enough, is all they need in order to get on the bandwagon, so to speak.
Yes, Mike.
Pull Susan, I'll have a second.
Okay,
But
you're allowed a second one since I get a second one now and again.
I just think what I really like about this is I know that every effort's been made to connect with the parents because obviously that's a real plus. But in those few circumstances where for whatever reasons, like Jody hinted, you can't, or they're unable to, it does send up sort of a quiet internal red flag, knowing very early on, where when I was in school, it wasn't picked up on until obviously a couple of grades later. So that's another benefit that just quietly in the school, teacher X, Y, and Z could say, you know, we really have to try and take this on with these 2 or 3 students in this particular classroom, more so than, you know, we would maybe like to, but for whatever reason, the connection isn't being nurtured. Not through no fault of the panel, but just for whatever reason. I just think that if the earlier you know, internally in the school, the better chance that young person has. And I know because I have a nephew at a very, very young age who's diagnosed with a pretty serious learning disability. Quite bright, but when it comes to reading, I won't get into it, but I encouraged my a family member, a relative, to have him tested and found out very early. So he was the exception. He's like 38 years old now. But back then he was the exception. He was found out really early and he went through a form of this in special education all the way through. And he was doing so well, it was always, well, maybe we should just demit him. And I kept saying to her, no, leave him on monitor. I advocated and said no. So all the way up through, including taking literacy tests in grade 10, whatever. And he successfully got his high school diploma and is working and paying taxes like the rest of us. So, but that was the exception to the rule, where now I think those children can be picked up and nurtured and brought along so much better and so much earlier. That's how I see it.
That would be the point of the screeners, right?
Yes.
That they can go in and, you know, or indicate where there's a risk very early on,
Yeah.
so that monitoring can go on sooner.
That's so great because it's the foundation that we build from. We can't read well. Anyway, and I think some of, and maybe not in all circumstances, but there might be a couple of percentage where maybe parents struggle at themselves with the whole thing and they just, oh, I just can't go down there. So
And sometimes it isn't the parent, it could be like your family member who has a learning disability of some sort, and they're doing their level best at home and it just isn't
right.
helping or working. So I hate to blame it all on the parents.
No.
So can I just ask a question? Because I know we do in the video up too. I'm trying to kind of get a bigger picture of this. So do we have kind of a long-term goal about where we really want to go with this and what how do we know when we've made that huge difference, which we think will happen, right? But do we have kind of a goal in place, Shelley? And I'm sure you could probably.
Yes, and we do.
Just to help us with that a little bit.
Absolutely. And like I said before, this was a screener that we had selected from a recommended list. So we know we took on these programs and learning ourselves. And we really tried to build capacity with our SK grade 1, grade 2 teachers so that everybody has the tools and resources. We'll continue with this screening twice a year and collecting all of that data and looking at the students that aren't meeting those benchmarks and putting that support into schools. But our goal is to build, not just have this team do the work, it's to really have everybody doing the work collectively. So we will, have the training. Once they have the mentor training, then we can train all of our certs, our grade 1 to SK teachers to do that screening themselves, use the diagnostic tools to really form the instruction for the students in front of them. So it'll hopefully be a whole primary division focus. And we should be, at that point, we're hoping now that even with just this team, seeing those little bits of results already in a short period of time, have everybody using the tools and doing the work, that we will see those gains as students progress along the primary grades.
So I suppose EQAO is going to be one of our big pieces.
Yes. So
right?
by the time, and we'll have this data then from Acadians of benchmarks and tracking them so that by their grade 3 assessment year, we should see stronger results there. So
our
it's coming.
Goal hopefully would be at least to match the provincial average, right?
Exactly.
More so.
Yes.
And I guess as I hear you talk about that, and I know you're doing a great job, teaching everybody else how to do it. In some ways, you're kind of teaching yourself out of a job, right? And I suspect in some ways that's what you're, maybe not hoping to do, but that you will do? I'm not sure. Jenny?
Well, I was just going to comment on that. and It really also is because this is an example. The funding that's supporting this work is an example of one of those PPFs that we talked about,
Yes.
which we don't know, but what that will be from year to year until we get that information. So for us, that really has been the focus of how are we utilizing these funds while we have them to build the capacity in the school, since we don't have any guarantees on what that funding will look like in the future to support it.
Yeah, no, actually, thank you for the reminder on that. That's kind of what I was envisioning, but I wasn't kind of sure where the timeline was. And we never know the timeline in reality, do we? We're hoping it'll be going for a while. And I think with the ministry's focus on literacy and obviously math, we're probably going to be okay for a while anyway. So it's great to get that. Yeah. Great to get
It does
that.
take time.
Oh, of
Actually,
course.
yeah, especially with struggling students, like even we notice, because that's our focus as interventionists, that there's progress, but it's not, like after 6 weeks, we know that it's for some, it's slow and steady, right? So, yeah.
And it's even, it's spilling into the younger, like junior grades as well, because there were still gaps, right? So they're hearing about success and having these tools to use and seeing students, making gains. And so now they're like, can I get on, can I use this as well? Where can I get some training and support? So, and it is applicable, they may, like as Brenda shared, you don't have to start at lesson 1, and you can start at a different point in the resource. So it really does take time to kind of close those gaps a little bit, but I think over time you'll start to see those progressions, and EQ will be telling.
I know we have a very enthusiastic, dedicated team here. That's for sure. Very much appreciate your time. So shall we watch this quick video?
What makes this
I think Hannah's got it up for us.
or digraph? Anna? 2 letters combined, and what do those 2 letters do? Emma? Make ka. Can anybody else add to that? Those 2 letters make, Lucas, same sound. They make one sound together. Okay. This morning we're going to continue on. And I'd like you to start with making the word pack. 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 And I like how you're using the CK together, the digraph together on the one tile. Good job, everybody. I want you to change the to change the to
These are great. Good. Well, thank you again so much for your time this afternoon and kind of helping us get our head wrapped around the kinds of things that you're working with. And we are very excited to see the gains we make in helping our young people learn how to read faster and earlier and carry that, of course, for their whole life. So thank you so much for what you do every day. We appreciate it. Thank you.
And
I want to take you so.
I know. That's right. No problem. Bye for kiddos. Great. Is that not the?
No, I don't. That's funny. Never know. Not that I know. of it.
This is true, right?
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Oh, John, George, I think you still have 5, right?
Yeah, I think I was like, I want to see. Yeah. Glad you could make it for the.
That's a lot. Started at 3, switched it over by 4.
Yes, yeah. And normally we
The
might have
foundation
been,
to build.
That's okay.
you know,
Okay.
I looked at my nephew.
best we can.
So
Thank
you.
My boots. I was looking over what Kim put down.
Pressure.
Oh, wow.
A lot of pressure, Kim. People are watching.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We will continue on our agenda. Trustee Primo had to leave, and I believe Trustee Kaiser is going to have to leave us shortly as well. So thank you for being able to be here as long as you can. We're going to go on to committee reports to the board, and I'll call on trustee Gannett to bring the Program and Student Achievement Committee open session report to the board, if I could, please.
Thank you, Chair Humphries. Yeah, the Program and Student Achievement Committee met on January 16th, 2024. We had, there's 3 brief reports. The first one is the Program and Student, or pardon me, the Annual Action Plan for School Effectiveness and Student Success. And after just hearing what we heard today, I'll just read a brief summary. And the purpose of the report was to provide the Board of Trustees with an overview of system-wide efforts at the elementary school level in support of student achievement and literacy and numeracy, really concentrating on the literacy end of things, as well as excellence in teaching and learning in the course of the 23-24 school year. And they just gave a presentation about really what they're doing here. And I really appreciate that the monies has come from the government. Let's hope it continues. There were no recommendations in this report. It was information. And I thank Jenny Smith and Shelley and the rest of the crew that really stood up here and gave a very thorough presentation. So that's the first one. The second report is the school year calendar. And there was one recommendation in that particular report. Jenny Smith mentioned that at last meeting, at the committee meeting. And there is one recommendation that the purpose is to approve the proposed calendar for the school year of 2024-25. And the one recommendation is, whereas the Ministry of Education requires that the RCDSB develop a school year calendar that follows the guidelines set out in the Education Act and the annual guidance provided by the Ministry of Education, we recommend that the Board of Trustees approve the RCDSB 24-25 school year calendar as presented in this report. And I don't know if Jenny wants to say anything else, but I just know that I was there at the meeting and there was a complete cross section of people, from union people to staff to everyone who had an opportunity for their input. It's mandated by the ministry. I believe our coterminous board is almost also there present. And one thing I wanted to note, and I believe I've noted it at another meeting, was the fact that historically in November, I believe it's a PD day, Jenny, that we've been able to keep that PD day because historically we have a lot of rural people that enjoy the rite of passage of going hunting with their parent or uncle or grandpa. And, that seems to be keeping up with the tradition. So that being said, I'd like to I would like to make a motion that
You don't need a motion, Mike. It's okay. Yeah. If you want to go ahead and just finish your report, because there's another motion in your third item as well. And then we'll adopt it and
Okay.
put them all in play. Okay.
my third report is school naming committee. And the school naming committee, Renald and our past trustee Brian Morris were very instrumental in that. And basically there was a wide cross section of people that Renald mentioned in committees that were part of the naming of that school. Hold on here. And the purpose was to provide the Board of Trustees with an overview of the work completed by the school naming committee, responsible to oversee the naming of the JK to 12 school in Barry's Bay, formerly known as Sherwood Public School, and Madawaska Valley District High School. And the recommendation is as follows: that the board approve the recommended name Madawaska Valley District School as presented by the school naming committee. That being said, that concludes the reports.
Just
And I move,
Notion to
and
adopt the report.
I move that the board adopt this report.
That's great, Mike. Thanks very much. Do I have a seconder for adoption of this report? Trustee Kaiser, thank you very much. Any comments or questions on the report? I think it was pretty clear. It was nice to have both our school calendar approved and also the new name for Madawaska Valley District School. So we'll have to remember that, try to remember which word I'm dropping. So that was work well done. And I know Trustee Kaiser, you were very involved in with that as well. So nice to have that done. So, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a seconder. All in favor of adopting this report? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And we have reports for our committee of the whole, and I would ask Vice Chair Boland if he would do the closed session report, I believe, first, and then the open session.
Sure. The committee of the whole of Renfrew County District School Board met on January 30th, 2024, and discussed the items in closed session. Finance and Resources Committee meeting closed session report of January 16th, 2024. Signing officer resolution and borrowing resolution and personnel matter. Only staff, President Director Nini and Executive Officer Captain Jameson. The following recommendations were made. Finance and Resources Committee meeting closed session report January 16th, 2024. That the Renfrew County District School Board adopts a closed session report of the Finance and Resources Committee meeting January 16th, 2024. And for the personnel matter, that the Renfrew County District School Board will conduct the first round of interviews with a slate of 8 candidates for the vacant trustee position. I move that the board adopts this report.
Thank you, Trustee Bowen. Do I have a seconder for the adoption of this report? Trustee Dobson, thank you very much. Any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting this report? And that is carried, I believe. Everybody agrees to adopt the report, right? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, looking for a Special Education Advisory Committee. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. You have an open session. Excuse me. I'm just moving on here.
Yeah, right. No, when you get through your meeting so quick.
I do.
I know. The committee of the whole of the Renfrew County District School Board met on January 30th, 2024, and discussed the following items in open session. The trustee vacancy, year-to-date financials 2023 to 2024, the deficit elimination plan for 2023-2024, and a mental equity project. The following recommendations were made. The deficit elimination plan for 2023 to 2024, that the Renfrew County District School Board approves the 2023-2024 deficit elimination plan. And for the mental equity project, that the board endorsed sending a letter of support. I move that the board adopts this report.
Thank you. Do I have a secondary to adopt this report? Trustee Doherty, thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting this report? And that's carried as well. Thank you very much, Trustee Bowen. Special Education Advisory Committee, open session report, Trustee Gannett.
Thank you, Chair Humphries. Yeah, the Special Education Committee met on January 17th. And the main item that we had, not the only, but the main item was our SEAC handbook. It hadn't been updated since I believe it was June 2016. So Angela McGregor and the group that we're with at SEAC have done a great job starting to pare it down. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we're having another meeting with the committee that's been struck. And let's just say that words that need to be in there will be, and words that we find that we don't need any longer won't be. And I look forward to tomorrow's meeting. There's a group of about 6 or 8 of us that are continuing to do that. I believe it's our 2nd or 3rd meeting. Basically, reports for the board were very, very, very minimal at that time. And the association reports, they just really talked about a couple of snippets, but really after the Christmas holidays, they didn't have too much to say. There were no recommendations made. And I
Move the receipt of the report.
receipt of this report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Gannett. Who's moved the receipt of this report? Do I have a seconder for the receipt of this report? Trustee Kaiser. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions for Mike? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving this report? And this carried as well. Thank you. The next item, you don't have any written material on this one, but as you know, the Public Education Symposium was held last week. And so we suggested in discussion last week, Trustee Doherty and Trustee Bolin and myself, we would just offer a few highlights from each of our perspectives and leave it at that. So Kim, can I start with you? If you don't mind.
Have my little summary here.
Yep.
But it was 2 like very full days of learning and networking. To pick my highlight would probably be when at the end talking about why we do what we do, and our Prairie District High School robotics program was highlighted among other programs at other schools. So that was pretty exciting. And then some of my other seminars that I went to, the food program, we talked about just different benefits of having food programs in schools and kind of where things are at for a federal food program and that kind of stuff. And I think it would be good to see what our different programs are within our school board, because I know some of them, but I don't know all of the ones in the different schools. And yeah, I think that was kind of a brief highlight for me. So
Thank you. Yep. Leo, what about you?
Same thing, like it was very informative sessions, lots of networking. Excuse me, there's 2 highlights for me. One was the presentation by Remain Mitchell on Indigenous language revitalization, and he made a statement. I always like when things rhyme, so this is was helpful for me. So from the student's point of view, he said, I can't be what I don't see. In other words, he says, for the Indigenous students, so if they don't see Indigenous staff within our buildings, then they don't see themselves as potentially being anything like a teacher, EA, even custodian, right? So they don't see themselves in that. So I thought that was interesting. And the other interesting presentation was by Jamal Lindell. He was talking about emotional intelligence. And he said, before you go into any meeting, that ask yourself these questions. So how are you before you show up? What state are people in when I show up? What state are people in while I'm speaking, while I'm there? And then what state are people in when I leave them? So I thought that was kind of neat, to bring away from that. Very interesting questions to ponder before, just any meetings or just any really interaction with people, right? And again, like there's lots of more stuff, but those were like 2 things that stood out for me.
Okay, great. And I had a couple that I will put in as well. And I don't know if Kristen and Meredith want to add a couple of comments too. And I know Jacqueline was in for part of it as well. Certainly for me, the networking across the province and the region is always probably the best, because you can pick lots of people's brains about what's happening in their board and compare to the great things that are happening here. I did enjoy the panel the first morning, talking about working with municipalities. And I think that's an area that we probably need to spend a bit more time on. For some examples that they had were, of course, we have libraries too in our schools, but theater, classrooms in the rec center, just a whole lot of variety of things. We need to kind of know what's going on in the municipal world as well, because it helps us then in our planning too. And I know we have some of those interactions when we're doing the long-term accommodation plan, but we probably need to have a bit more of that. So I thought that was interesting. They really recommended having open and frequent communications at both the staff level and the political staff level. So that may be an area we want to spend a bit more time on. We did have Steve Pakin there from the agenda. If you watch TVO and have seen the agenda, he was very good. He gave us lots of historical kind of pieces of knowledge, but also it was interesting to watch him speak, because he does keep kind of that neutral stance, right, at all times. But there were times that things kind of crept in that maybe weren't quite so neutral. And then on the Friday night, we had the debaters. Again, if you're a CBC fan at all, the debaters were there with Steve Patterson, and they had written a segment specifically for us and had lots of terminology around education and OPSPA and talked quite a bit about the minister and the ministry and they even wove in a whole lot of board names, as I recall, that it was just quite amazing. It's too bad they didn't record it, but they did. It is what it is. The other one that I really enjoyed too was the Human Rights and Equity presentation by Najira Jamali Sojourner Campbell, and I know some of us have seen her before. But she talked a lot about human rights, particularly, and how all that intersects with what we do and how we need to keep that lens on always. And then finally, the food literacy and school food in Ontario was of interest too. And again, maybe an area we need to advocate more for, and maybe it's, some municipalities actually fund school programs in schools. So anyway, lots of things to think about. Kristen, did you want to add any comments at all from your perspective?
Sure. You have already highlighted some of my highlights, but I will just add that I attended the OPSPA's French as a Second Language session with a focus. There was a panel of staff and trustees from other boards talking about initiatives that OPSPA supports with French as a second language. And I know RCVSB has participated in those initiatives on a regular basis. So it was nice to hear that we've been involved and that we've been collaborating with other boards and also to hear what other boards are trying in terms of teacher recruitment, hiring, support, and retention, specifically with a focus on French as a second language, because we know that that's a provincial need in terms of supporting our core French, extended French, and French immersion programs. And then I would also like to highlight that OPSPA hosted a session on hate in Canadian classrooms. And that session had a specific focus on addressing anti-Semitism in schools. And that was very beneficial as well.
Meredith, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I could just add quickly, I would agree with your comments, Chair, about the municipalities, and I found that really interesting to hear, and where we as a board that has multiple municipalities could do some of that work, and that sort of tweaked for me. Another one that Jacqueline and I both attended was a session on AI, and I found that really interesting and learned quite a bit of how to verify information. So I think that would be good to bring back some of that and sharing with colleagues. And then there was a session on crisis communications and just communication that was actually being given by some of my former colleagues and friends. And it was nice to sort of check in and hear some of the things that they were saying and feel rest assured that we were, in step with what is being said across the board, but also some good learning there as well.
Jacqueline, did you have anything to add?
Oh, well, if we're on the, we're on the trail.
I don't need any heads up. I just
I know it's fine.
be able to comment if you choose.
I attended 2 sessions that had to do with anti-Semitism, so that was really good learning for me, and I'm happy that I was able to attend those. And additionally, the one on AI, I agree with Meredith. It was very valuable, and I did pick up a resource, and I gave it to them yesterday, of a program that they run that we might be able to use in our schools as well. So brought back a few resources and just a nice chance to, chat with different people. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
That's great. Thank you very much. It was nice to see as many attend who can, because it's you always learn new things, right? It's a great professional development opportunity for the trustees for sure. We appreciate the staff can go as well. Indigenous Education Advisory Committee meeting. I know that Christina, unfortunately, is not able to be with us today, but Leo, I believe you were at the meeting as well. And
I was at the meeting, so was Christina and Mike and all, so they can add to it. But just a sort of brief thing for me was we had talked about the board action plan for Indigenous education and collaborative activity. It's called BAPI. That's kind of cool. So Tina Nelson talked about the action plan for the committee, and that it's a just a living document. And there were some questions up on the board about what you thought of it. So some of them, the sections were what does supporting students look like in the framework of Indigenous education. And then how do we make sure that we have a community that is engaged and aware of Indigenous education? What does that look like? What does supporting educators look like? And what does using data to support programs and students look like? So they were up on the board, and then we had different people who would go around and write, what they thought about it. And it's summarized here, but I didn't want to read all that out. So just words of information. And I believe that Ronald and that team were going to take all of that stuff together and just develop a little bit more of a. I want to add to that, Ronald, then we'll go to Mike if he wants to say.
I think the purpose was to get input into the board action plan, that's a step that is mandated by the ministry. And the team did a great job to make it an active meeting. And what the team had planned on doing, what the feedback confirmed, is that there's alignment there. So it's just a great opportunity. It's always nice to be meeting with our community partners.
Sure. Mike, did you have anything to add?
Just looking, and Leo checked off all the boxes that I had in my anecdotal notes. So great
Good.
job, Leo.
Okay, perfect. So do you want to make a motion to adopt this or to receive this report?
I do.
Okay. And could I have a seconder to receive this report? Mike, thank you very much. All those in favor of receiving the report? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, up to updates. I believe we're on to a director update. And we'll turn it over to you, Director Neely.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off by saying how proud I am to have joined Renfrew County District School Board. And I want to give a huge thanks to the trustees and to all of the staff. I have received such a warm welcome. Everyone has been very supportive, especially supportive in terms of helping me learn specifically about the county and about the district. And what the strengths are, they're unique to our CDSB, and then what are our next steps for improvement. And I'm just really looking forward to working with the staff to support the students, families, and communities in our county. Just a couple of highlights from this past month. We know December is always a really busy month in our schools, and January is certainly doesn't have the same flavor, but it is just as busy because we know that we still have activities happening. For example, we have Family Literacy Day that happens in January, and we know schools participate in that. Central Public School hosted an educational family math night in January, and Cobden Public School is gearing up for 2 nights of High School Musical Junior on February 21st and 22nd. So we encourage our families and community members to attend. January 27th marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it's crucial now more than ever that we stand united against anti-Semitism. And again, in reference to the Public Education Symposium, it was very timely to have those sessions happening last week for our learning. And our CDSB is committed to Holocaust education, and that education is embedded in the grade 6 curriculum as well as grade 10. But again, we are encouraging educators to embed it throughout the school year and in every grade. February marks Black History Month. And again, we know that learning about Black history and celebrating Canadian Black brilliance is not just a 1-month activity. It needs to happen year round. And our equity team, Central Equity Team led by Amy Johnson, has promoted that messaging and works with educators throughout the school year to embed this learning, specifically hosted a session called Going Beyond Black History Month. And that session was hosted in December for our school leaders and educators. And finally, congratulations to our secondary students. They are wrapping up semester 1. In elementary, term 1 is coming to a close. So we know that report cards are being prepared and will be in the hands of families and students in the very near future during the first couple of weeks of February. And we wish, on behalf of Executive Council, I'm wishing all of our students a very positive, fun, and what I'm looking for here. Successful, thank you. I was on a good track. Yeah, successful second half of the school year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the chair's report or chair's update, I didn't actually have a whole lot to say for January because I don't know, I guess I didn't do much. I'm not sure. But of course, we were welcoming Director Nemi, so that was a big plus. And I do appreciate everybody's support to Kristen. I know it's been a bit of a whirlwind because I think she has talked to a lot of people and been to a lot of places in a very short time. But it's been very helpful and I know that staff have really appreciated that you have been able to get around as much as you have. And I know you'll look forward to meeting the rest of the staff and the rest of the schools in the next month or so. The trustee vacancy, I know you're well aware that that we are in the process of filling that vacancy. Thanks to the communication team, we were able to spread that message far and wide. We ended up with a good number of applications, a very strong set of applicants with excellent experience. So we will be setting up interviews in the next couple of weeks and still planning to hopefully have that person join us at our February board meeting. But it's going to be a challenge. We have some excellent candidates. And Public Education Symposium, you've already heard a little bit about that, but it's always an excellent opportunity to learn new things and get to chit chat with other people. And for Trustee Bowen, it's about seeing movies because he's missing his movies in Pembroke. So he got to see 3 when he was in Toronto. You'll have to ask him all about those. And then finally, I know that many of you will remember past trustee Nick Edge. I was able to attend the funeral of his mom a week or 2 ago. And it's nice to see him. I hadn't actually seen him in person for a little while, and he's doing well, and he's back in Thunder Bay, finishing up his course. And I think he's actually going to stay and work on his master's up there. So sad time, but anyway, I think he's holding up well. And I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that he had gone through that sad event over the last. Okay, so we do have, of course, a student trustee. Yep. Oh, we don't have 4 anymore. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we've lost Dave Dobson. Okay.
Yeah, we both left at the same time.
Okay, I didn't see Trustee Dobson go. All right, so we no longer have quorum at the table, so we really cannot do anything else, correct?
You can talk about the letters, but we can't make.
Yeah, we can't make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, let's just finish. Yeah, I think we can kind of quickly go through. Thank you for alerting me to that. There is an update from the student trustee as well, and I know we've already touched on that in our open session with regards to the letter that they want us to do. So that one got passed, so we're okay. There was a letter as well under correspondence. We have 4 letters. 3 are just for information. The first letter was is a draft letter that we agreed to put together at our last meeting to send to Minister Lecce, identifying concerns we have specifically around Bill 98, some things that we would like him and his staff obviously to consider. And they basically were focused around making sure that small and rural board perspectives are considered, making sure that initiatives are flexible enough so that we can make those smart decisions at our level, and then providing extra leadership and resources to accommodate the unique needs of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students. So those were the 3 areas we focused on. We do have a letter ready to go, but we won't be able to approve that today. We'll bring it back to the board meeting in February and do so there. So I think with that, I'm not aware that we have any other business that we can't really consider anyway. So I think with that, I will declare that this meeting is adjourned as we have come to the end of our agenda. So thank you, everyone.
Have quorum to adjourn the meeting.
A meeting without quorum, so I don't know. We'll just do it anyway.
Put my hand up twice.
Ask for a motion. You noticed that, right? Anyway, thank you, everybody. Good meeting, lots of good discussion, and appreciate the updates from everybody. Thank you. Oh, I didn't see Dave go. I didn't see him. I knew Dave was going to go, but I didn't realize. That does become a challenge for us.
Anyone wants that?
I
got it.
Sure, I'll have to look.
Another